This conference will now be recorded.
Everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another in the series of Cloud Communications Alliance webinars. Want to thank you for joining us today, especially we're in the dog days, if you will, of summer. So thanks for joining us. A lot of us are starting to go on holiday, vacation. Some of us are already on there, but thanks for joining us. This is a really, the more we got into preparing for this webinar, the more important I realized, the role that soft phones are playing more than ever before. So this is a really important webinar, and some of the conversation we've had on the side talking about where it's headed, where the future's going is remarkable. So hopefully at the end of today we'll have a chance to kind of have a little bit of an open discussion about some of this stuff. We have some the experts on the call. We have Clint Edwards from Poly, Todd Carruthers from Alianza. Todd's dealing with some power energy issues, but he's working on batteries right now. So Todd, thanks for joining us under those circumstances. Eric Strickland couldn't make it, but we have Raf Torblanca, and I hope I didn't mess up your last name too much.
Correct. That's correct. Yeah.
And Raf's over in Switzerland. So thanks for joining us this evening. I appreciate it. Karen, go ahead. Go to the next one. Guys, we've done enough of these webinars where you already know the tools. You can mute yourself. You can see everybody on the screen. You can see the presentations. You can turn on your camera. We have enough bandwidth. If you want to leave your camera on, that's fine. What I ask you to do is mute yourself if you're not speaking. But our guest speakers today have agreed to, if you want to ask some questions throughout the presentation, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question. If we don't get it, we can we'll tag it on at the end of the webinar. But feel free to ask the questions as they pop up, because we don't have that many people that we can't make this more interactive. Okay, Karen, one more. Great. Okay. With that, I think I'm turning over to Todd first. Todd, take it away, please.
All right, great. Thanks for having me today. And this is a topic that is near and dear to me. Some of you may have known Counterpath in the industry. We're acquired by Alianza, which closed the end of February. But before that, Counterpath is nearly 20 years old in the business. We spent a lot of time kind of defining, working in the IETF and the standards that a lot of us use on soft phones today early on, and really focused on one of the, what I would consider one of the more commercial grade SIP clients on the market. And a lot of you, we have activated and deployed millions of clients over that period of time. I was with Counterpath for 13 years, just coming on 13 years. So it's been an interesting time for me as it relates to soft phones to see how it's really matured in the industry and kind of see where it's today and where it's going to go. So kind of my focus today is to give a bit of a historical perspective, talk a little bit about kind of the soft phone migration, and then kind of a little bit of kind of where I see the market going, kind of at least from my perspective. So maybe with that, and go to the next slide. When Counterpath first launched, the focus was, oddly enough, to create a service around VoIP. And if you go back 20 years ago, the landscape looked very, very different. But we had a significant amount of kind of interest from a lot of large OEM players at the time, the traditional OEMs that we all know today, that were looking to really create an endpoint, basically, take the hard phone and make a soft phone out of it, basically. And that was the primary driver. And it was really, the concept was to put the voice capability on a computer. And this is even just a bit before Skype and other services out there. And so it was interesting because, at the time, you kind of had a lot of dynamics going on all at once. You had end users that say, I'm used to the hard phone. I don't even know how to use a soft phone. I would say the headset market was, not as mature from a soft phone perspective as it is today. Computer processing issues in some cases, especially as it related to video and the coding and things like that. So at the time, the features and functions were very limited, but it's grown into this full UCC capability that up, probably 2 years ago, it really became the face of the service for a lot of different companies that are either providing Softphones clients or services that are out there today. And a big part of our business model at the time at Counterpath was to create a custom Softphone experience that included branding capability as well as technical capability, because early on in the VoIP community, even though we had SIP and everything was quote unquote standard based, there was a lot of proprietary SIP messages, for example, and other items that we really had to deal with, and interoperability with different devices, including at the time Polycom or Poly today, Cisco devices. We had to work with a lot of these different devices, especially when it got to video. We did a lot of work around Polycom's video phones, for example, because that's what businesses were using. And so the market was focused initially on keeping the cell phone separate, but making it fit as well as possible from a customization perspective to work on any device, any network, and across any platform. And from a cell phone perspective, vendor perspective, it becomes very difficult to really manage that, because you have to work with every platform. And like I said, even though they're all SIP compliant in quotes, they still have to deal with some of the differences that they have. And then when you get into features that are deemed proprietary but are pretty standard, like call park and that kind of thing, you have different interactions and different ways to manage that, and it gets even worse when you get into visual voicemail and other more advanced features. So that was kind of the last I would say 15 years from Counterpath's start, was just focused on providing that cell phone, and then becoming the face of the service for our customers. If we go to the next slide, just to kind of give kind of a look back in time, there's one of the first soft phones. And by the way, most folks out there know us by X Lite, which was our free soft phone, more than they do Counterpath even at the time. And X Lite was a soft phone that was downloaded, used, and our software is still used in labs, even in competitors' labs that already have soft phones, because we're used quite broadly across the industry to be able to test and do interoperability with. So it's kind of carried on over the last 20 years from a Counterpath soft phone perspective. But you can see when going back to what I was saying earlier, the soft phone on the left there was very much, and that was our iBeam product at the time. Very much like a hard phone. You had the dial that was really kind of to the forefront and the present of it. Very different than how we do it today. Most of our customers live in our messaging window and make calls from there by point and clicking, or click and point, and that kind of thing. But as you go forward, Skype starts to come out, and then you have other carriers, in this case BT, with their communicator product. It's still dial focused, but starting to kind of morph into more of a contact centric approach, where the contacts would drive the interaction of the communication. And so then you had this whole flood of internet over the top apps starting to come out that really kind of froze and drove, in many cases, different capabilities on the carrier side. I'm going to focus a bit on the carrier side, because that's where a lot of the focus of the solution was, and distributing through carriers, service providers, into SMBs and primarily enterprise at the beginning. So if you go to the right of the internet over the top disruption, we started seeing service providers trying to take a look at competing against the likes of a Skype. So in that example, you can see Rogers One Number solution, where their whole goal was to be able to let their users, when they traveled, to basically be local on the Rogers network. And it was pretty interesting, because I saw it in action when it launched back in the day around 2012, 2013 at the GSM Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. And I just happened to be, sitting at a table, and the guy next to me was on his computer using Rogers One Number and calling back to Canada. So, it was interesting to see the operators started to dip their toe and trying to think like, kind of that operator, or sorry, that OTT mentality. And kind of going forward, we see that it's becoming less of just the face of the service, but really the nexus of the services that are offered. Everything flows through the client, and from an API perspective, you can enable a lot more capability and functionality within that within that kind of theme. And that's what we're starting to see today. So it's not just about, having the brand, having the logo, but what are the workflows that we're enabling, and how do we interject ourselves into the workflows from a client perspective? And as we go forward, the best way to do that is to really tightly control the client into the service that you're offering. So it's really an end-to-end or full stack solution that really gets to the heart of delivering that nexus of all the services, because there's a dependency beyond just the client and beyond the server, and they have to work really closely together. So if we go to the next slide, just to kind of continue down that theme, again, focusing on the service provider side of it, if you do a click, Joe, there, for forever, really, the caretakers of communications is really seen as, as on the shoulders of the service providers. And even today, a lot of us would argue that, they're behind in some of the overtop services. There's no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, they still have, every service provider has a relationship with a customer, whether it's consumer or business for the most part, whether it's broadband only or whether it's services. So service providers are uniquely providing or capable of providing services in a way that's very local, but also has a significant global reach. And so, what would fuel that, and if you do a click there, Joe, that was the enterprise, the telco OEMs that really fueled the roadmap for the service providers. And so the service providers kind of relied on the telco OEMs to kind of pave the way for innovation. And in many cases, overall, the innovation path there was a bit slow. And then fast forward today, not only were they helping the service providers, but they're also competing with their service provider customers and going direct to enterprise. And a lot of that comes through acquisition of different companies by the traditional OEMs. So that's kind of what we're seeing in the market today. But over the last few years, if you do one more click there, Joe, we can really see the disruption coming on from the over-the-top apps. So Skype, for example, coming online first was really about on-net calling, and then of course they added Skype out services that allowed you to reach the PSTN. And a lot of the pickup of those apps was in the SMB, and a lot of folks use the mix of different apps. And even today, when we're doing business with customers, particularly in APAC, for example, we find a lot of customers are using WhatsApp, they're using Skype, they're using a number of different kind of over-the-top apps as it relates to communication. And so you could be communicating across, a number of different applications. So that whole kind of drive and that disruptive nature of the services has really kind of shaped kind of where we are today as it relates to kind of the market and the focus. And a lot of the service providers have really provided to the enterprise. They do provide obviously voice services, the SMB market, but we're finding that a lot of them are trying to go after the SMB market with a more consolidated solution, but they haven't really been able to do that effectively as compared to the over-the-top apps. And if you do one more click, through that came the rise of what we kind of look at as the over-the-top UCC service provider. And that innovation gap that was formed between the kind of the traditional caretakers and the disruptive services were fulfilled by those that provided a full service, except they didn't bring the broadband with them, basically. So like the Ring Centrals of the world, for example, where they were, found a way to get into the SMB in a very efficient way and also provide that full level of service. Now, going forward from a soft phone perspective and how we look and think about the soft phone, how it impacts, and as I just talked about in the previous slide, there's an opportunity here for the service providers to kind of leverage what has been taken on from a capability and function standpoint, and leverage that back into the SMB and enterprise market, because they're well positioned, as I said before. A lot of them have broadband facility, a lot of them have the relationships with almost every customer. They act local, they serve locally, but they also can have a global reach. So one more click on Joe, and where I see kind of the opportunity going and a real rise to kind of where the market is headed is this wholesale full stack. And if you look around at latest announcements, you see some of the OTT UCC providers trying the wholesaling basically to service providers to kind of accelerate that. But the greatest differentiation is if you can customize a solution through a full stack client and server application, similar to Alianza as an example. There's others out there that offer that capability through the service providers that have the best reach. So that's kind of how we see the market going, and it's interesting to see a lot of the providers that Counterpass sold to, and now that we're have been acquired by Alianza, the awesome fit that's there from that case on the wholesale side. All right, any questions before we go on?
I just have one quickie.
Sure.
You mentioned WhatsApp. So what can you drill down a little bit on it? Like, what's the WhatsApps of the world? How's that driving you guys?
Well, so what's happening is that it's really showing and proving out the disruption capability of those kind of apps, and in many cases very specific types of services. Now, when WhatsApp first came out, now that you can do voice on it, but when it first came out, it was really focused around messaging, right? And same with Skype. Skype was all about on-net calling, as I mentioned earlier, and then you have WeChat. There's a number of different capabilities now to do messaging and voice, even through Facebook, FaceTime on Apple device. Google has their solutions. So that whole experience of being able to prove out a different way to deliver communications and have a different user experience, that in many cases was led by the Softphone capability itself, has proven out that, hey, if we can consolidate these, instead of having 7 apps that I use, I could have one app from one service provider, for example, or one vendor. I get that great user experience, and I'm also able to have that all consolidated, and going back to the nexus of services, have that one client that works within all my workflows. And that's really where I see a lot of the market going. I didn't touch on it in this presentation, but this what we're talking about is the knowledge worker space in the context of the service provider and how the Softphones are applied against that. And if you look at the market, 40, 50 billion in a couple of years across that space, that's only 20% of the market. 80% of the market is really the frontline worker space, and a lot of them are made up of SMBs. There's some large companies there too, but you go all the way from Bob's Plumber to the likes of like a Lowe's or something like that. And when you look at that market, it's really prime for this wholesale full stack approach, because you really have the capability to be able to match the workflow, and that's the key. It's beyond just APIs. It's definitely APIs are part of it, but you really got to fit within the workflow, and the Softphone in combination with the backend server make that possible.
Thanks, Todd. Clint, I think you're next on board from Poly. It's funny. My 2 cents. I thought headphones were on the way out. I thought this whole thing was dying, and all of a sudden there's a whole new life there. So take it away, Clint, please.
Yeah, no, it's kind of an interesting, interesting world that we're in, and as Todd was talking, it's sort of an interesting, when the Softphone started, it was all about how do I make the Softphone look like the hard phone, right? How do I give it the keypad and the device? And what I'm going to talk about, and what I think is a trend, is we're actually seeing the full circle of that, which is now, can I run a soft client on a hard device and bring that experience into that world? So I thought I'd give everyone just sort of a little view of kind of what we're seeing in the market and how we're viewing that. Let's go to the next slide. So the first place where we've seen this over the last couple of years has been at first on the video side. So we at Poly make, obviously we're in the video industry as well as obviously the phones. But what we saw was a desire for a lot of the UCaaS providers to say, can you I want my experience running on your hardware. So the idea is, as a UCaaS provider, as a soft client maker, you don't necessarily you're always at the, you're always dependent on the capabilities of whatever the hardware is that you're viewing it on. Usually that's just the PC, which means the best you can get is the PC webcam and the audio speakers on that, and and there you go. And so what we and we at Poly, of course, we have a history of making video and video conferencing equipment, and we've made a lot of innovations, such like speaker tracking and the ability to frame up a room or an individual, and they can move around, and the camera will follow you around, and a lot of those things. And so what they wanted to do was marry, what can the hardware do in terms of cool camera technology and great microphone and speaker pickup and dedicated sound systems, but still run the experience that they'd created from a software or UC client perspective. So a couple of the slides here are just sort of examples of that. So Microsoft has a whole thing called Teams Rooms on Android, where they've created an Android app of Teams, and then they want to run it on hardware. So in this case, this is a Teams running on one of Poly's video bars, the Studio X. Ring Central has done something similar. It's kind of on the right-hand side where these are just snapshots off of websites, which is, again, use this hardware but put our software on it. Same story with Go to Room and Log Me In. Same story with Zoom. So what it's done is sort of given the UCaaS provider the ability to innovate, these platforms to innovate, to create differentiation, but still take advantage of what a purpose-built hardware can do. And so I think that's definitely a trend, and we're seeing that. And if you move to the next slide, we're now seeing that move into the phone world. So it's, again, Microsoft was like one of those that said, I won't run Teams. I don't want to support Teams or telephony any other way but on my app. And so that then forced you to have platforms and hardware devices that will literally run a third-party app. And now that's expanded with, and this is fairly recent, but again, the Poly has the CCX series, which is an Android-based device, but it takes, you're kind of marrying high-end microphone, speaker pickup. You get things like the acoustic fence to eliminate background noise, and embedded headset integration. And then the partner or the UCaaS provider then builds an app basically, or adapts an existing mobile app to say, I'll take advantage of that hardware, but I'm going to put my experience on that phone. And so again, this is just now started, just now coming into the marketplace, and it's still pretty new. But we think this will happen to a much greater extent over the coming months. And then from a Poly perspective, we're trying to expand our SDK on this front in the coming days. Next 30 or 40 days, we'll start publishing some things. But I think that's going to be important for those that want to maintain that experience through all devices in all forms, but still take advantage where needed of the advantages that a hardware device can add. So if we go to the next slide. So then what you have in the marketplace is you're gonna have to start talking or thinking about kind of two different experiences. There's what do I do if I'm running my app on a piece of hardware, and then there's still the experience of here in this case a Poly phone that's running the Poly user experience and Poly SIP stack and all those integrations there. And we actually still see both in the marketplace. And the reason that we see both is not all apps can do everything that a phone has done. So an app the soft client app is not necessarily carried forward the full feature set that might exist and had been done on a normal SIP and telephony sort of introduction. So there's still a gap in those areas because again, most of the apps come from a mobile phone heritage or a mobile device or a PC, and they don't always run all the same telephony features there that have been run. Again, all the BLFs and shared call appearances and many ways in which to park and transfer calls have not always transferred directly. So anyways, I think we're going to see both in the marketplace for some time. If you move to the next slide, one of the things that I think you'll also see in the marketplace is what we're calling app switching. So sometimes, and we've seen this with I'll give you an example of Microsoft came out, they have a Teams client, but there's a lot of telephony functions it doesn't do. So almost immediately after they brought it out, there's like thousands of requests that says, but I want to do group paging. I want a page, and there's no way to do that in a Teams client because it's just something that they haven't supported yet, or it's wherever it is on the roadmap. But it's something we've done for what feels like a million years in our SIP telephony world, right? And so the request is, I want to run this app when it can do what it, when it has the function, but I want to be able to flip out of that app and do, what we've done for a million years in the SIP world, for paging or something else, and I want to do that on demand. So one of the things that you'll see in the marketplace will be this ability to switch back and forth. This is a functionality that, again, Polly, we've rolled out in sort of a sandbox form and becomes formalized here in the next, later this quarter. But you're going to see more of that, I think, having to switch contexts if that soft client or that app does not have the full functionality. So anyway, so something to look at. The next slide. And then I thought I'd just put this kind of tagline here to talk about because I will get asked of every time, is this like, is the phone dying? Is soft clients taking over the world? Is something along those lines, right? And many have predicted the demise of the phone, the hard phone or the hard device for a long time. And I think there's a couple data points, and one Todd actually mentioned was that that a lot of times the lens that people look at innovation is through the knowledge worker or the knowledge worker exclusively, because the knowledge worker is more likely to use a soft client than a hard device. But what we've also found by selling to a lot of those is that they're still using devices, maybe not as high as percent as the frontline worker, but still pretty significant. And so anyways, and what we found, and this goes back to Joe, your kind of earlier comment on headsets, right, is the experiencing you see strictly through a PC with PC speakers and a camera does not solve the workplace issues that you have to deal with, right? It does not address noise. It doesn't always address the quality. It just does not fit all for all the work styles and workplaces that we have to work. And if anything, with COVID, that's gotten more complex because now it's no longer a workplace. It's work is something you do, but it happens in a lot of different places. And COVID has forced that upon a much greater population, not just a knowledge worker anymore, but really frontline workers. Almost everyone is now have to be a hybrid worker at some level. So with that, just a couple data points, right? Devices continue to have a place because there's always be superior audio, video performance, and innovation, again, with things like acoustic fence and being able to block out background noise that you don't always necessarily will get on just a standard, standard PC with a client. I will just mention headsets are a necessity, and the important one thing that should be looked for in that soft client is make sure the headset integrates well with the soft client. So what you don't, what is a difficult user experience is when a headset mute status is different than what's on your soft client mute status, and that's one of those contention things that you can really really make a much better experience for your end users. And then, again, back to the phone thing, our phone demand's never been higher. Part of that's, due to the success of the service providers. But it seems to me like a lot of the soft client versus phone discussion still is more of an and versus an or sort of, mentality. Sometimes I need a device, sometimes I don't. So get both is kind of what we're seeing, at least from the demand perspective that we have. And then as I've already mentioned, again, work is something you have to do, office, home, road, third space, I refer to as, and then that's really about, whether it's a Starbucks or, someone's garage or, visiting an in-law or someone, right? It's somewhere that's not your home, but it's somewhere you work. The other thing that I'll just say, by having a consistent soft client across all panes of glass, so to speak, not just your PC, but your mobile device, as well as any hard phone, is we definitely hear from the larger enterprise that adoption is key. And if they can reduce training, it's massive for them. And so if you can have that experience that spans all ways in which the user interacts with the service, it is easier for them, and that is definitely a benefit. Yeah, so that's kind of the nutshell. And then just the last slide I have, if we go there, is one of the things that we're trying to look at, and I think it's worth looking at as a service provider, is, again, what are your users doing? What are the end users, and what type of user are they? What type of worker are they? And then use that to help recommend what the solution or solutions should be. So without going into this is some research that that Poly's has done and continues to do, where we talk to a lot of different workers and worker styles. And without going into, again, great detail, but the idea is that there are definitely different ways in which people work, and where they work and when they work there versus somewhere else definitely impacts what type of technology is best for that situation. If they're in a situation where they need to reduce noise, either because they're in an open office at home or an open office at work, right, there's a different set of technology that you need to surround them with than if they're able to close the door on an office at home or at work, right? So that's where headsets come into play, and where a soft client plus a headset might be good, but sometimes it's you really want a hardware device. Are you working in group meetings? Are you working? Are you joining in a conference room for some meeting? And then what are the people on the conference room, and who are they talking to on the remote side? And are they sort of democratized to where they're on par at the same hierarchy, at the same level, so that they can be heard, and you can really make a hybrid work environment function. So anyway, just wanted to call that out as, I think, something that's also important to consider in a soft client or soft client strategy is when do they need that tool, and when is it not always the right tool? And if it's not always the right tool, how do you augment that so that it becomes the right experience? So with that, any questions?
Well, yeah, Clint, I do find, I'm not surprised that there still is a large demand for desk phones. Not at all. And I think it does augment the soft client. I think both paired together. By the time you pay for the line, you pay for the service. The phone it's the hardware is an incidental expense. Everything else is already there, I believe. So I think augment is probably the right word.
Cool. Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you, Polly. Next up, we have Raf from Switzerland. Raf, you still awake?
Absolutely.
Hi guys,
Well,
Joe.
interesting system.
Joe, it's David.
Sorry, Joe. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Dave.
Joe, it's Dave. Dave Dads here from
Yes.
UBOS.
Yes, Dave.
So certainly agree on the handset sales, and it's interesting. Now people are going back to offices, even though slowly. That there is certainly a pickup. Also, people in home offices are using them, but I do think that as an industry, we need to get a bit smarter with the features, make them easier to use, make them really attractive, but to increase sales as well. So I mean, I'm in agreement there. One question for Polly, and I don't know whether it's quite appropriate, but plainly, you're not alone in big stock shortages on the hard phones, which is causing problems and pushing people to other brands that maybe have got better stock. But is there any, do you see any light at the end of the tunnel on the stock shortage?
Yeah, it's definitely a big question right now, and the demand is way high, and we're and there's definitely a system-wide chip shortage that's out there that definitely impacts us. I think there is light, but it will vary sometimes based on individual products and where we are, and it's quite a fluid situation. From what we're getting from again the suppliers of our boards, and well, not just ours but the industry's boards, chips, and everything else. So there is light.
Well, I'd say certainly in the UK,
but we're going to
be seem to be hit more than others in the UK, which is obviously unfortunate. It may be different in different regions of the world, accept that, but certainly in the UK.
David, yeah, I just ordered a laptop from Lenovo. I got a 4-month delivery date.
You should have ordered it from Dell.
Well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we've obviously all seen these different issues, but it's always disappointing when customers. I mean, if there was no other phones they could order, then they might hold their order for Poly. But if there's others that are on the shelf, then they're obviously potentially going to be pushed that way. Especially on the basis, someone made the comment, it's an incidental sale. So what you don't want to do is be holding up the whole order for hardware on the desk. So almost certainly, the service provider is going to be offering something alternate so that they can get the monthly revenue.
Yeah.
No, totally agree. Well, it's one of those that obviously no expense is being spared to get everything we can out of the marketplace for parts and everything else. So we'll just continue to work with you and be as transparent as possible on what we have and when we have it.
Good, thanks.
Raf, to you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rafael Torreblanca. I'm working for Acrobits. I'm one of the founders of the company that was acquired recently 2 years ago already by Untitled. Probably most of you know is a carrier and a wholesaler in the US that sells termination messaging. They have a UCAS platform as well based on BroadSoft. And our core business since now 12 years since we created Acrobits is very similar to the one of Counterpass. So we have our own SDK, which is basically a signalization and RTP engine that powers desktop applications and mobile desktop and mobile applications, right, for voice over IP. So we were basically the very first company to put a CPAP in the App Store in 2008. We were as well the first one supporting push notifications that are now basically not nice to have, but even mandatory, right? And since then, we have basically created really more than, I think, 700 projects for many, many customers around the world, right? And my point today is to try to show you something a little bit different, right? Something that had just appeared now since the pandemic, COVID-19, right? And I'm going to talk about video conferencing and how we can basically put video conferencing as part of the whole puzzle of unified communication within the same tool, the same softphone, into the same application without having different things, right? That service provider mainly, right, can use today, fully branded, of course, right, with different suppliers around the world without having to engage any resources on the soft switch side. So this is really what I will try to show you. If we have a little bit of time, I will give you a demo that it makes a little bit of sense. Thanks, Karen, to changing the slide. So this is really what I tried to explain to you, right? You can already go to the next slide, please, Karen. Thank you. So how the pandemic basically has changed the trend, especially with video conferencing and for service providers, right? When the pandemic kicked in March 2020, suddenly video conferencing became just not a nice to have, but really a must to have for the services, right? And everyone was caught by surprise. And you saw the rise of providers like Zoom, Cisco WebEx, Microsoft Teams, right, that capture a lot of the market, right? So they end up having a little bit of a problem, right? Because many of them, Zoom is a good example, they start selling as well the Zoom phone. So basically delivering voice services UCaaS services through their application, right? And basically capturing a big part of the market, right? So many of our customers, they come to us and they tell us, look, we really have to have a solution, right? What can you offer today? How we can integrate things in decent time to market, right? And that we can have really something carrier grade, right? So as you can see here in this graph, it's kind of crazy, right? But I think everyone heard about it, right? When the pandemic kicked in, you can see the rows of, Zoom. It's, the downloads of the app, they came, from 60K, right, to nearly 400, 500Ks, right? Which is incredible, right? I mean, you saw the stock rising, you saw the popularity of video conferencing, and something that really was a little bit obsolete, if I may say, it wasn't that easy before the pandemic to show your face, right? To expose basically that kind of privacy that is part of you when you communicate, right? And since the pandemic, everyone get used to, right, to use a video conferencing basically to show our faces, right? Even if, video phones, they exist in the 80s, right? So the change was drastic, and it really accelerated this business, right? The business of video conferencing. So next slide, please, Karen. So, whoa, that's very small. I don't know why. Maybe the printing, I'm sorry about that. Anyway, so what my point here is, obviously, when you are a service provider, right? And suddenly you are caught in the fact that you have to deliver video conferencing to your customers, right? I personally don't know many switches, right, that can handle that properly, right? You need a lot of capacity. They are very CPU intensive, right? Everyone I think understand that. And you have to really come with a solution, right, that you can compete against any other leader, right? So for that, there is basically one solution, right? And this is the one that I want to discuss. Please, the next slide, Karen. And you have obviously SDKs, right? So an SDK is a complete kit tool, right? From where you can create your own video conferencing experience, and that you can plug in, this is the interesting part, to your existing application, right? Everyone is already has the experience with WebEx, right? That have now integrated BroadSoft, where you have the telephony stack and the collaboration stack, right? This is not new, but it became very popular now since the pandemic, right? And everyone would like to have the same experience and plugged in into his existing unified communication experience, something that's good at WebEx. But that's possible, right? Because Zoom, Amazon Chime, and WebEx have SDKs that support natively the iOS operating system, the Android operating system, as well of any browser, Chrome, Edge, or Safari. Exactly the same thing that you can do here with this video conferencing tool that we're using. You can have it and you can brand it, which is very, very important here, right? The branding part is essential. Why? Because every single service provider wants to expose himself, right? Not any other competitor, wants to look technologically advanced and have the same quality like any of these SDK providers, right? So the interesting part as well with these SDKs, right, is that it's not only the client side that they provide, but as well the complete server side. If you want to scale suddenly from 1,000 users within your pool of customers, you can easily scale to 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, as much as you can think of, right? And you're not tied basically to build the servers, right? Put all the infrastructures in the backend, right? Because the whole service comes along the SDK. And this is a very important part when you come, to CapEx, OpEx, right? Because you really have, virtually, right? Literally, sorry, a request for power, and you will get it immediately. So this is very, very nice. It's very handy, and it makes a lot of sense, right? When you're going to deliver solutions like this ones, right? Next slide, Garrett, please. So here, well, I'm sorry, that's very, very small. I don't know, the printing went a little bit wrong here, but I'm going to show you a demo just in a minute. So you can clearly see here in the left slide that you have a desktop application with all the features, right? The telephony stack, you have the contacts, everything that you use, messaging, and so on and so forth, right? And in the right side, you have this conferencing tool that is completely embedded. That's the part, the interesting part, into your UC experience. So your users, right? They don't have to download one app for the UC services, another app for the video conferencing, but everything is included into the same application, right? Easy to maintain, easy to explain, easy to deliver. In the same way, if you want to invite guest users that are not part of your team of people, right, they can join via, as I explained it before, a web browser session, right? And the web browsers are widely supported, even Safari, which was a problem even lately. Apple did a big effort to support this technology over Safari. So now it's really seamless and it works extremely well. The next slide, please, Karen. The same way in the mobile application here, you have the telephony stack that you use every day, right? And one of the tabs into your application will be the conferencing, right? So you can really use it in an everyday basis, wherever you are in a conference, wherever you are in a call. These SDKs, they allow you, right, thanks to very powerful APIs. If you are in a call, you get, if you are in a conference and you get a call, you will be muted, right? You can just answer, right? You can, if you have your DND set, well, you will not be called, you will not be interrupted during the conference. So the use cases that you can build around embedding unified communication conferencing tool like that into your app are nearly endless, right? The other thing that worth mentioning here, right, is that the operating systems, right, and the SDKs that all these guys they built lately are extremely complete, right? You can really play with very low-level APIs to really make work what you have, right? Everything that you have built previously on the SIP stack, right, very seamlessly here with the video conferencing. So we still have some time. I would like Karen to give you the sharing here, share my screen, right? And I'm just going to show you briefly how it really looks, right? So let's see if I can do that now. Excellent. Okay. You can see my screen, right? Yes?
Yeah, yes, we can see it.
Okay, cool, thank you. So here, typically you have the mobile application, right? As I mentioned before, you have the dial pad where you can basically place a call, right? Nothing really interesting here. Everyone knows, you have the contacts that are embedded into the soft phone. You have your favorites where you can, monitor the ones that are online or not. You have all the messaging stack where you can send messages, you can send files, and so on and so forth. And here you have this video conferencing tab. So if you want to initiate a conferencing and invite users, it's as simple as pressing the button here, and you'll see me appearing twice. And I'm sorry, it's going to be a little bit funky, but it's the way it is, right? So you see me here, and I can really invite people. But the beauty of that, really, the interesting part for service providers is if I can browse back and still be into the soft phone. I can still play here and place the calls. I can still answer to messaging. I can still do everything that I'm supposed to do to my job without interrupting the video conferencing, right? And if I'm gonna go back, I just press the button and I'm back, right? So again, one app, one user experience, only one thing to explain to the users, and it's easy as well for the support people into the company and the ones basically that are gonna deploy this, right? So I'm gonna add, leave this meeting here. And it's very complete because you can even schedule a meeting, right? Sorry, if I have to go here, right? Normally, let me see. Sorry about that. What is it? Here you have the settings, sorry, right? I'm gonna select my calendar, right? Because I have plenty. And now I can schedule an event, right? Select the room, which is my personal room, right? Select the date, select, till when that this meeting is gonna held, next. And it's gonna even tell me that I'm overlapping some meetings because I have conflicts. So really reading my Google Calendar, it will read Office 365, many other integrations like that, right? and I can then just simply review that into my calendar, right? And that's it, and go back to my meetings and so on and so forth. So it's very powerful, right? Everyone that has been using Zoom or Teams, right, will recognize all these things that you can do. But again, they can be fully branded, right, and deliver, you know, with basically your own corporate identity, right? The things that you want to see. I think it's important, and it's very important for the service providers today to be able to show themselves and not someone else, right? And still having the same capabilities, right? So I'm gonna, you know, shut down this meeting too. And here into the desktop application, it's basically exactly the same, right? You have your contacts, you can call, you'll see, well, this app expand as well when you have a conference, and you can simply, you know, start the conference from here, right? It records the calls, it does everything that, you know, that you can think from a video conferencing tool. This is again all provided, right? This one that I'm showing you here is powered by Amazon Chime, right? Has been integrated into our SDKs, right? For other customers that wish to have it, right? And we have, you know, you can do the same thing with WebEx, and you can do the same thing with Zoom. I think Vonage have a very great API. I've seen as well, I think there is something from someone from 2600 Hertz here that have their own solution as well. But, you know, many use cases, all these guys, they give you some kind of different features. They give you as well different pricing. I think you can find basically what you want, exploring a little bit. And this is it. So I hope what I showed you makes sense. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Rafi, makes total sense. Beautiful demo. I really enjoyed seeing that. That was really cool. Yeah. Questions. I have a million questions, but you guys go. I'm talking too much. You guys go.
Sure.
Anybody? Well, Raf, I do have one. Zoom amazed me, you know, during the pandemic, how they were able to, what was the word you used? A request for power, how they geared up so quickly. I mean, I'm sure we've all read about some problems, but all in all, they really got up to speed tremendously fast. I guess it has to do with how the platform was originally designed. Is that a fair statement?
I think so. Zoom, at the opposite of many others, right? They're SIP compatible, right? You can really basically hook any polyphone. You can, right? And you can call, and you can have an extension, you know, to join a Zoom conference, right? Directly via SIP, right? That's very unique. I don't think anyone else has it today. And it's true the way that they scale their platform. I mean, it even amazed myself. I don't know how they did it, right? It's incredible. When you think about that their apps were downloaded like, you know, from 60K to around 500,000 suddenly, right? How you can put that power up, right? They had some issues, if you remember, right? People were complaining during the pandemic about them, but yeah, I mean, it's a little bit unfair because the way they did it still, you know, to serve all these people and to be so performant, right? It's crazy. And again, you know, kudos to them because they took, you know, they took that opportunity as well to try to take a little bit of business from the service providers, right? Launching the Zoom phone, right? So they were very clever doing what they did, right? And I think solutions that the one I show you, right, allows, again, the service providers to have the same tools like Zoom, right? Zoom is not the only one providing an SDK, right? And being able to provide the same quality, right? I'm gonna say same quality, I'm talking about the standards, and they really have to be carrier grade, right?
Yep. Good answer. Any questions from the audience?
Yeah, Joe, sorry, I dropped out for a minute because as soon as Dave said Dell was the best computer, mine completely ballsed up and threw me out of it. So, it's probably a question for another day because it's a little unfair to only have, you know, sort of one device producer in the room. But the question really was, as the green pressures come on, as we talk about cloud, you know, the sort of environment, etc. What is the message that we should be driving? You know, I noticed that when we talk about handsets, there was a leaning towards the feeling that if you wanted one, you should have one, and that's good. But if we are trying to cut things back, if we are trying to change the things that we manufacture, is there a conversation there about how we should be leading things?
Before anybody answers that, we're supposed to end in about 1 minute. We're going to keep this going for about another 5 minutes or so if you want to hang in there, because this is a good conversation and a good question, Ian.
Yeah, I mean, Ian, I think there's different ways to look at it. So, you know, obviously you try to do things that are environmentally, you know, friendly. I think I'd argue from the whole UC space that we're solving a lot of those problems because we're able to do communication and reduce travel, which I think you could argue is a greater burden on the environment than, you know, than a handset here and there. And so I think that's probably the way that I think most device manufacturers and maybe as the UC space that we're all in, that's how I would suggest that we would answer it would be, look, we're trying to democratize where and how people work, make people equal so that you don't have to always be in the same room, whether it's for COVID or in this case, your question for the environment. Because we get people access with full UC capabilities wherever they are, whenever they need it, and you know, and by doing that, I think we solve a lot of the environmental pressures.
Yeah, Clint, Ian, let me interrupt you 1 second. Clint, great answer. And Ian, we're planning another webinar which we'll announce very soon with the solutions committee at Cloud Communications Alliance, and that's one of the things that we have on the agenda as far as the circular economy and what do you do with your used stuff, what do you put back into productive use. So we have a whole webinar in the works similar to what you're asking.
Yeah, no, that's great. And yeah, yes, I echo what was just said by Clint. I think the travel is one of the big things that we're really helping move along. So for sure, we're net contributors to the change for the good.
Yep. Karen, hey, give me one more slide real quick, please. Upcoming stuff. So we have an upcoming webinar, but way before that, September 20th, 22nd, we have the Cloud Comms Summit in Scottsdale. We are going to do a face-to-face meeting. Right now, we've been talking to speakers and the attendees, and nobody's canceling. Rooms are going to be in short supply. This hotel will sell out. So if you're planning on coming, do it soon, please. Anything else, Karen, got? I think that's it. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us today. Great, really a fascinating webinar. I think we could have gone an extra hour on this. I had questions about the future and so forth. I think we maybe want to do a V.2 in a few months on this, but I think a great one. I want to thank you guys for taking your summer holiday time off to help us put this together.
Absolutely, it was great to be here. Thank you for having us.
Great.
Definitely, thank you.
Have a good rest of the day, good evening, and thank you all very much. We'll see you on the next one. See you at the CloudCom Summit, hopefully.
Nice to see you all. Joe, speak to you tomorrow.
Yep, thanks, E.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.